Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Westside UU's Sunday morning reflection time. I'm the Reverend Carol Bedeau. I'm privileged to serve Westside as minister. Today, we're going to be talking about being in it for the long haul. And it looks like we're all going to need to be thinking of long-term strategies rather than shorter-term strategies for dealing with the pandemic. And so today, we're going to talk about the long haul. But first, I have a few announcements for you. As you may be well aware, we have changed our Sunday morning schedule, our reflection time, our video, and also our interactive worship, either on Zoom or sometimes outside our building, is at 10 a.m., 10 to 10:30. And then coffee hour by Zoom is from 10:30 to 11. In a few weeks, we'll be releasing some information about our upcoming adult religious exploration courses, which will be by Zoom. And we'll have some other information about some other special events and activities if you happen to be interested in learning about membership at Westside. So keep your eyes open for that. Also, if you haven't had a chance yet, go to our Facebook page and check out our 30 Days of Pride videos that were posted. If you haven't had a chance to watch those, you might want to look at some of them. And if you have watched them, we're hoping that we can get some survey results on what you thought about those videos. We are in the process of renewing our welcoming congregation status, which is a status that suggests that we are welcoming to LGBTQ plus people. So if you have watched those videos and you'd be willing to help us out with that survey, we'd really appreciate it. Well, so today let's talk about being in it for the long haul. Before we begin our reflection each week, we take a moment to pause and center ourselves. We invite the bowl to sing, to sound, calling us into ourselves. So I invite you to take a deep breath, sit back, relax, and as the bowl sounds, I invite you to just simply come fully present into this moment. The words for our chalice lighting this morning come from Harry Emerson Fosdick. The most extraordinary thing about the oyster is this. Irritations get into its shell. It does not like them, but when it cannot get rid of them, it uses the irritation to do the loveliest thing an oyster ever has a chance to do. If there are irritations in our lives today, there's only one prescription. Make a pearl. It may have to be a pearl of patience, but anyhow, make a pearl. And it takes faith and love to do that. So last week we had our first ever virtual worship by Zoom. And this was an experiment. As we have been doing these pre-recorded messages, it's me or someone else speaking and it's not interactive. So we decided it was time to start having interactive worship. We had over 30 people attending and it was really, truly wonderful to virtually be with friends from our congregational community. It's been months and months since we've really been in the same room together. And of course, we've been interacting through meetings and conference calls and things like that and in smaller groups, but to actually really be together was wonderful. And it was a little sad for me. Last week, it began to sink in for really the first time that this community, my community, will not be in the same room together for many, many, many more months. Even when we come back together, it will be different. We will have changed. Circumstances will have changed. And I know that everyone is talking about this change and about how things will never go back to normal. And I've even said it, but it really started to sink in this last week for me. I love being in a room with people I care about and who care about me. I love being in person to have conversations. I like to pay attention to body language. I like the tea mugs and the coffee cups and the pieces of cheese and cake that we're nibbling on while we chat. I like conversations that challenge me and that invite me to grow as a person. I love listening to other people's perspectives up close, where I can really experience their passion and their commitment to their views. For me, this sort of community interaction is really essential. And it's important for me to be physically with other people. So realizing that this really isn't going to happen soon really affected me. I walk through the halls of an empty building each week and I miss the people. I miss the voices, the chatter, the chaos of kids dodging past adults as they run off to their classrooms or the playground. I miss the smell of things baking in the oven during the worship service, getting ready for potluck after the service. I miss the juggle of all the different people participating in a worship service. I miss board meetings in person where we share food and tell each other how things are going. I really miss being with people. Now, at first, when the pandemic first hit, I will admit that I experienced some relief. Some of you admitted that you did too, like, phew, we're going to get some time that's downtime, some rest from all the stress and all the hurrying. But we're starting to realize that this is going to go on a lot longer, and I'm starting to hear phrases like boredom and endless repetition more than I am downtime. Now on the farm, which is my home, the blueberry bushes are still making a little bit of fruit, but their leaves are starting to turn orange and fall off. The mornings are cooler and the days are shorter, and even though it's still clearly summer, it's starting to show hints of fall. The end of the summer has always meant for me the beginning of the year, right? The beginning of the school year, the beginning of the congregational year, but this year it's really different. So realizing this, the phrase that started to go through my head was being in it for the long haul. The long haul. And it dawned on me, I have no clue where that phrase comes from. Where does that phrase, the long haul, come from? So of course, I looked it up. It's actually a phrase from the railroad industry originally. It's a phrase that's used to describe different lengths of travel in industries like trucking or air travel or shipping, any kind of transport. And it originated in the mid-19th century. So here's an interesting set of facts for you. Up until the 1880s, it was actually fairly standard practice for railroads, which were monopolies at that time, to charge more for short haul trips per mile than for long haul trips. But these short haul trips were actually part of the longer haul lines. So in a trip that went from point A to B to C, it cost less per mile to go from A to C than it did from A to B or B to C. And a lot of people thought that was unfair. So Congress in 1887 created the Interstate Commerce Act, which made that illegal. And they also, by that act, created the Interstate Commerce Commission, which was the first government federal agency to regulate industry. So that agency is still the regulatory agency that regulates long hauls and short hauls. Now, a couple years later, the Supreme Court nullified that part of the Interstate Commerce Act. And then a few years later, Congress came back with a revision. And a few years later, the Supreme Court. They went back and forth for a while. But the bottom line is this. This was all an argument about what it costs to manage things getting from point A to point B to point C in the short haul versus the long haul. And it occurs to me this is actually really relevant to what we're struggling with right now. So short-term versus long-term costs is a relevant thing to think about. It's a relevant thing to think about in our current situation. And I'm going to say also that it's relevant for our community to figure out how to maintain ourselves short-term versus long-term. So a little aside, usually at some point during our worship service, we have an offering. We take an offering to support our congregation. We haven't been able to do that for months. So please note that we are continuing to attempt to sustain ourselves as an institution for the long haul, and we need your help. So if you are someone who pledges to Westside, who gives regularly, thank you so much. We still need to keep the electricity on and the staff paid and the internet going and all those things. So thank you. And if you're a visitor to Westside and you would like to contribute to help us make it through this time, through the long haul, I invite you to donate. You can see that link here, the westsideuuc.org/donate. And also, please note that we do donate part of our proceeds each month to a Share the Plate partner. And this quarter, for the next couple of months, we're supporting an organization called Positively Living, which supports people living with HIV/AIDS in Knoxville. So consider supporting Westside and those organizations if you are able. And thank you so much for considering it. So this difference between the costs of the short term and the long term, this is actually really quite relevant to us right now. It occurred to me that, this situation is a sort of travel. It's a sort of trying to get from one place to another. And in a sense, it in fact does cost more to do short-term strategies than long-term ones. If you think about the amount of energy and intensity it required to make that transition in March. My partner, Tracy, said to me when we were talking about this, he said, well, if you think about a steam engine, to stop a steam engine, which is what they were using in the 1880s and the early 1900s, to stop a steam engine and to restart it took an enormous amount of coal, an enormous amount of energy. Way more than to just keep it going once it got up a good head of steam. And that actually is true of what it felt like to all stop, shift gears all the way to all stop in March. We were chugging along at full speed one day, and the next day we were all stop. That was an enormous amount of energy. And then to figure out how to restart, new worship styles, new video technologies, all kinds of things. So that was a high energy, high cost kind of transition. Perhaps maybe thinking about how we change gears for the long haul is different in terms of cost and energy and resources and output than for the short term. So I have a question for you to think about today. What were your short-term strategies when maybe you thought this was only going to last for a couple months? And what, by contrast, are your long-term or long-haul strategies? That is, of course, assuming that you do share the idea that this might be a long-haul, long-term situation. Not everybody agrees on that. But if that were the case, can you imagine the difference between the strategies that work for 3 or 4 months versus those that might work for 12 or 14 or 15 months? For me, some of my favorite stress management techniques involve travel, back to the interstate commerce image. I love to travel. I love to visit historic sites. I love to take road trips. I love to visit family and friends in Michigan and California. And during the short-term phase of this pandemic, that wasn't really very practical. I just said, well, I'll just wait. But now it's becoming clear to me that just waiting, well, it's going to be a long wait. So I miss people. I miss the feeling of freedom, of movement. I miss the ability to just hop in the car and go visit my parents. And now they're older. That's not the most practical thing to do. I have to think about, well, maybe I should quarantine myself for at least a couple of weeks before I go do that, so I don't risk their health. I don't know exactly what my long-term strategies are going to be. The things I have liked to do to help me kind of center and get out of the fray and come back renewed and refreshed, aren't quite as easy now as they were before. You know, thinking about how you're going to manage this for the long haul takes a little time. I don't know what strategies I'm going to land on since I, like everyone else, am just trying to figure things out from one day to another. I'm not sure exactly what feels safe to me or reasonable. I'm not sure which new costs I'm willing to pay. For example, am I willing to pay the cost of a hotel rather than staying in a friend's home where I don't know what the risks are there? I don't know exactly how to manage costs and benefits, risks, and things that might be good outcomes. I'm having to adjust my whole way of thinking about things, which is kind of hard. But it's also probably really good for me in some ways. I'm finding that this experience is, if nothing else, clarifying what I value most, helping me see what really matters to me and what is actually optional, helping me go deeper than I might otherwise have gone in evaluating my own choices and preferences. And it looks like, things being what they are right now, I'm going to get that rich opportunity for a lot more months. So I guess my takeaway from all of this is that my attitude matters a lot. My approach to things, how I choose to look at things. We each need to decide which practices, which beliefs, which emotional coping mechanisms are sustainable for a long haul. We need to be kind to ourselves as we do that. And we need to not expect things to be predictable. And we need to expect that things will not go as we planned. Really, logistically, the best we can do is be present one day at a time. So this week, I invite you to consider your own strategies. How did you adapt in the short term? How much energy reserves did that cost you? Are you running a deficit right now, emotionally or physically, because of the changes? And what about the long haul? What are your strategies for the long haul? Do you have reserves left? Do you need to refuel? Do you need to charge your batteries back up or refill that engine with coal to be able to get going again in a new way, on a new path? These are lots of difficult questions, but I invite you to contemplate them deeply and in the community of good friends and family, in whatever way is safe for you. Each week, as we conclude our time together, we extinguish our chalice, but always remember that this does not mean we are apart. Each week, the light of truth, the fire of commitment, and the warmth of community go with us into our lives, into the days and weeks and months, not just for the short term, but for the long haul. So I invite you to remember that we are with you. May your journey be peaceful, easy, and joyful. Go in peace.